And we're live. Okay, so good morning this Friday morning. Apologies for the slight delay. We've had a few technical issues this morning, but thank you very much for joining us on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. I am joined this morning by two incredible guests, as well as my co-host, Cara Houchen. So first and foremost, we will start with Mex Ibrahim, who is the CEO or founder of Women in Hospitality. Mex, would that be fair to say? No?
Quite a lot of wrong things there, but anyway, never mind. Co-founder, Women in the Food Industry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And
also,
that's all right. No worries.
apologies. It's first thing in the morning. My glug of coffee hasn't quite kicked in as well as it should do. And also Kate Nicholls from UKHospitality. So good morning to you both this morning.
Morning. Good to join you.
Thank you for being here. So, as usual, we have a 30-minute timer to try and discuss some of the most hotly discussed topics currently that are floating around the hospitality industry, both UK domestically and also globally. The one that we're going to be focusing on this morning is the closure, not just of Mir from Monica Galetti as rising minimum wages increase in the UK, but I think actually on a much larger front, there's an awful lot of closures within hospitality kicking on at the moment. I mean, I was up in the Lake District last week, and the number of businesses in high tourist areas that were just permanently shut is actually quite scary. So I just wondered who wanted to sort of kick this off and thoughts on, first of all, the thoughts on minimum wage increasing and sort of what sort of impacts is that having currently on the hospitality community?
Do you want me to go first and sort of answer that sort of big question? We do a regular survey of our members about the key issues of concern, and on a quarterly basis, national living wage, national minimum wage costs shot right up the agenda over the last quarter when we had the announcement from the government that there was going to be that 11% increase. And of course, for anybody who is employing younger workers, the workers who started to get minimum wage when the age band dropped from 23 to 21, that was closer to a 20% increase in their wages. And overall, that resulted in around 17% uplift in wage costs across the sector as a whole. And it's because it's not just those people who are on living wage, minimum wage, or at the entry level jobs. It has an impact now across differentials throughout the industry, and it's starting to hit supervisory roles, management roles. You need to maintain those differentials. So the cost is not just for those at the lower levels, it's across the board. And that's a huge amount to absorb. So look, everybody in the industry wants to pay their staff good wages, fair wages. We need to be looking at making sure we can keep pace with the market. We want to invest in our people. It's not just the living wage that's the issue, it's the costs around it that are going up, the cost of doing business, energy, food price inflation, rents, rates, inflationary environment altogether, and also at the same time the cost of living crisis that's hitting our customers, which means that the money coming in through the front door isn't necessarily as good either. That's the real challenge. But over the course of that weekend, that Easter weekend, we closed our doors on the Sunday. We reopened them on the Monday, and we had £3.5 billion of extra costs hitting the sector, most of that being in terms of wages. That's an awful lot of cups of coffee, pints of beer, and we can't pass that price on to customers. So that's the big challenge. It's how do you square that circle of giving good wages, investing in our people at a time when the other costs are rising too. And we need measures to tackle those other costs and reduce that cost of doing business to avoid more closures. And over the course of the last year, we saw 6,000 sites close across the UK. 90% of those were independent businesses. That's a business closing for good. So we need to make sure we keep the pressure on to be able to get those costs addressed.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, with the rising cost of inflation, and it seems like there's a massive pinch point sort of on the horizon. But Mex, what's your experience been of the living wage increase for women in the food industry?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to Kate's views in terms of it's just cost amongst cost. So cost increased costs just basically across the board, like energy costs, transport costs, everything seems to be going up. I think my only thing to bear in mind with this, though, is that people do deserve to be paid fairly for their work. And if we are having, a lower wage than other industries, it's very hard to get people to move into the industry and then see it as a real career rather than a stepping stone. Because I think what we see is that a lot of younger people are just not coming into the industry because they think it's a temporary measure and it's something that they just do for a short while. If we want to get people coming into the industry and staying in the industry, we do need to pay them fairly. So I do appreciate, obviously, the heavy costs, but at the same time, people do need to be paid a fair wage if we're to attract the right sort of people into the industry. And by right, I mean people that are well qualified, but also new people coming in from different arenas who've obviously got a lot to bring to the industry too.
Mm. And with regards to these rises, I mean, obviously, this is something that the government have brought in across multiple sectors. It's not specifically targeting hospitality, but where does this go? Like, does this end up with another rise next year, or are we looking at a much wider issue here when it comes down to the cost of doing business in today's climate versus actually the money that people have got to spend as spare capital at the moment?
Well, I think the last 2 years' rises in the national living wage have been quite exceptional. The reason being that the current government set a target that it would get the living wage to 66% of median earnings by April 2024. And because of inflation in the whole of the economy, because of what's been happening to wages in the whole of the economy, that's the metric that you're using to assess it. So they have gone up quite significantly because of the cost of living and above inflation increases in wages generally. That's what saw the big tick up in the living wage last year and then again this year. I think last year was around about 8%, 9%. This year, double digit. So that was an exceptional one-off, and it was because it was tied to that metric. Now we've got to that. We've got a living wage at 66% of median earnings. That's the third highest living wage in the world. And the remit that the current government has given the Low Pay Commission for this year is maintain it at that 66% of median earnings level. So there is a maintenance point to see how far and see what the impact has been, see what the economic impact has been. So really what happens to the living wage this year will depend on what happens to wages across the rest of the economy. The minimum wage is pegged at 50% of average earnings. So we'll be keeping a close watch out. We'll be advising the industry, and anybody who's a member will get that advice immediately we get it coming through. We'll be looking closely at what happens to wages across the rest of the economy to give businesses a sense of looking ahead as to what might happen in April 2025. It's likely to be around, sort of 4 to 7% is the band that we're looking at the moment. If you look at what's happening to other wages across the economy as a whole, we wait to see what happens for the remit for the Low Pay Commission from the next Parliament, the next government, 2025 to 2030. That's the key point. But that should help to give a line of sight. We'll be suggesting that it should be a Low Pay Commission, which is government, unions, employers and independent academics making those recommendations. That's what's given the Low Pay Commission the power as it's gone forward. I was involved in the original setup of the Low Pay Commission and the very first national minimum wage. It's one of my proud achievements, working in public affairs to help make sure that was right, to get it right, so that structure means we don't have an adverse impact on jobs, but we do, as Mex rightly said, give people a fair pay for a fair work and a real living wage to be able to come through, but it has to be economically affordable. That's the balance that the Low Pay Commission does every year and tries to get right. And hopefully for that period, 25 to 2030, we can make sure we've got that metric in place to look at maintaining it, and that will give operators the ability to reward better or to have their own pay structures in place that are above that minimum, which should be the floor below which wages should not fall.
And Mex, with regards to, I mean, there's been a lot of, and rightly so, there's been a lot of press recently about the differentials between what men get paid and also what women get paid, and trying to get that back to a decent balance now. Are you seeing that with this living wage increase that that balance is starting to be better?
I think it definitely is at sort of at the lower end, but obviously when you do look across the board at senior management levels, the differential between men and women is fairly apparent and fairly large, and despite the Equal Pay Acts and things like that, there are still areas where the differential is kind of unacceptable, and particularly something that we're also noticing, not even just within hospitality, is within people that are investing in businesses, that there's much less investment going into women-owned businesses. So that's probably even true to a certain extent of like women-owned restaurants, but we're certainly seeing that in terms of women-owned food producers. So the investment levels are not great, which is added into the pay differentials as well. So it's not as if you can go out on your own and think, I'm going to leave hospitality, or not even leave hospitality, I'm going to leave the restaurant that I'm working for and then start to build start to run my own restaurant. You might find it harder as a woman to get the same levels of investment as men.
Okay, is that something that UK Hospitality have? I mean, I know you're fighting a lot of fires at the moment with various different things, but is that something that UK Hospitality have noticed? And are there any current campaigns or campaigns planned specifically to support those who are looking at perhaps an entrepreneurial lifestyle within the restaurant community?
Yes, I mean, we do a lot of stuff. I know people know us best for our campaigning and the lobbying and the political work that we do, but we do provide advice, guidance, support to businesses, to startup businesses and businesses that are looking to grow. And we do have a lot of insight and advice on compliance that's available on our website. So we do take these forward. We are working actively with UK Finance and the British Business Bank, as well as with government, to improve access to finance across the board for hospitality businesses, to de-risk the sector in the eyes of the investment community, but also more particularly to pick up on those points that Mex is saying about female businesses and female entrepreneurs. There was a Business Connect conference that the government held recently in Coventry that was looking at that, and there's a new task force about backing female entrepreneurs and supporting them. So yes, it is something that we're actively involved in, as is the broader issue about women in business, women across the sector, and gender pay gap. And actually, although Mex is right, there is a lot that's still to be done. I think we should be proud of the fact that of all industrial sectors across the economy, we have the lowest gender pay gap in hospitality. In fact, in most of the businesses in the hospitality sector, it's a reverse gender pay gap because of the nature of the employment that we've got. And also, we've met our requirements under the government recommendations around female board representation. We meet it in hospitality, and more importantly, we meet it through executives. We don't meet it by non-execs, which I think is a bit of a cop-out. You can easily find a woman or somebody from an ethnic minority to sit on as a non-executive. Actually supporting the executive committee to have female CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, chief people officers, making sure that we've got the women in the top roles that are coming through in an executive capacity is much more important than just meeting the arbitrary targets. And we do quite well in hospitality. So we should, yes, there's more to do, but we should be proud of the work that we've already achieved.
It's amazing. Cara, is there anything from yourself?
Just bringing it back to what we started with, which was obviously it was fueled by the closure of Mir. I don't know about you, but I feel like every time I go on social media, there's another announcement that someone's closing their doors, and it does appear to be a lot of the time fine dining, high end. They may have been there for many, many years. Obviously, this industry is very well known for pivoting. Do you feel, both of you, that is kind of restaurants are having to do that, or they're having to kind of change their offering, change to accommodate what customers now can maybe afford or budget for, and they're having to change what they do?
I think there is some of that, and some of that is post-COVID. You know, it's notable that where we are seeing some of these high-profile closures, they are town and city centre restaurants in particular, or other outlets. You know, if you look at across the board for broader hospitality, you've got the same thing. Revolution and Stonegate looking at refinancing. You've got Deltic in the nightclub space. The commonality is town and city centres where people are not travelling in as frequently because of the change in work from home. And some of the restaurants that you're seeing will have a footprint that is much more disproportionately impacted by business visitors and business customers and tourists not being there. There is also a move as well, and you saw it with Rue. You know, there is a lifestyle issue as well, as you know, are you looking at changing the model for your work-life balance? And you know, perhaps that also comes into play with Monica Galetti with her restaurant. You reach a natural end of the road, so there's many factors. We are seeing businesses pivoting. We are seeing food-led businesses, whether they're fine dining or casual, refining their menu, narrowing their menu to be able to minimize the costs. And it is that real, you know, it's become less about the creativity and the cooking and more about financial management back of house to make sure you're not spending more than you need on energy, food, labor, and getting that balance right. So it's a much more complex business operation. So there's the pivot away from certain types of businesses in certain locations. There's the pivot within businesses to provide a broader service. But then also, again, you see the entrepreneurship coming back, that, you know, people do close. It's really sad when they close, but we do have opportunities for people to reopen and set up again and find ways of coming back through. So, you know, great to see Tony Rudd back on social media yesterday with the new restaurant that he's involved in. Desperately sad at the beginning of the year when he had to announce the closure, but we do find other ways that people will come back through. And I think what we also need to focus on is making sure that we have the headroom for people to be able to invest and grow. So you had, yes, 6,000 closures, we had 3,000 openings last year. And we need to be getting that rate of new openings coming back through. And we are an entrepreneurial sector that provides opportunities at a very low cost for people to restart and pick up the pieces again.
Yeah. Mex, what's the feedback from your network in terms of pivoting and changing their offering?
Yeah, there's definitely, as Kate rightly said, a difference between city centres and restaurants that are hugely dependent on office workers, because Mondays in most cities are deader than ever, and a lot of restaurants are just deciding that they're completely closing on that day. I mean, I know a lot of restaurants used to close on Monday, but it's even more are closing now on Mondays. So it makes the whole city centre seem, you know, remarkably quiet, and you know, not the lively place it used to be. And ditto even with Fridays. You know, Friday nights used to be the night that everyone went out, and that was the start of their weekends. Thursday, certainly in the West End, is very much the sort of newer Friday. It's probably not as busy as the old Friday used to be, but Friday itself is again remarkably quieter than it was in the past, with many restaurants maybe not necessarily closing like they have on Monday, but the footfall is considerably less, because people are you know, since COVID in particular, and also since their offices facing all of the cost of living crisis and the energy bills and everything else, they are also closing, or allowing people to work from home. So there's less incentive to come in, and if you're doing the sort of the work leaving parties, etc., they tend to be on the Thursday night. I mean, in terms of pivots, that's not, you know, obviously there's some interesting things going on with people like Callum Franklin, sort of moving the sort of very British food that he does to Paris, to France. So that to me seems like a remarkably interesting and a successful pivot as such. It's certainly had a lot of press in the last week. Whether we'll see other people taking what is their very sort of English or British take on things to other areas, that might be another interesting pivot, isn't that working in a place where you are seen as kind of a little bit more unusual, could be a potential pivot as well.
I think just to echo Kate's point about that entrepreneurial spirit, I think where there's always hard times, there's also a great deal of opportunity. And I think that as over time, once inflation starts to cool, banks' interest rates will start to cut. They'll be very keen to stimulate the economy with more lending. So I think there's a really exciting opportunity for those who are looking at setting up businesses within the hospitality sector to be able to actually start to get a foothold and get the financial support that they need. We have had a comment come through, which is getting people in on minimum wage with the promise of trunk to bump it up, only to not give them sufficient trunk is unethical and deception. No adult should be on minimum wage. Apprentices who still live at home can manage this, but adults cannot. Our industry is dying and our government is allowing it. But what I wanted to specifically just touch upon there is obviously the new rules that are coming into play with trunk, and ensuring that the trunk goes direct to the teams rather than goes through the business first. Kate, are you able to just sort of highlight and expand on that a little bit for those who may not sort of be aware of that change coming in?
Yes, so at the moment the change is scheduled to come in from the 1st of July. We were expecting the detailed guidance and regulations on that to be published last Monday, but they've been delayed. So it's possible that if they don't come out soon, there will be a delay in that starting point. But at the moment, the legislation is due to come in 1st of July. It requires 100% of the tips, service charge and gratuities, and it does specify any of those, and at the moment there's a question over whether it also applies to cover charge. Any tips or trunk that are left, whether it goes through a trunk or not, it all has to be collected and has to be redistributed to the workers in the site, and at the moment it is at that site level. It can be distributed across all of the workforce, and it can be done in a way that suits the business. And it is for the business to decide whether agency workers or temporary workers are included within that, in consultation with the workforce. But it is a principle that 100% it can come back in through the business, it can be done through payroll, or it can be done through a trunk, or it can be redistributed in any way. But other than cash tips that are left directly, it has to be centrally collected and centrally redistributed 100%. And if it's done through a trunk, then obviously there are the benefits on NIC and the efficiencies that go alongside that. But it will mean that people will have complete clarity and transparency about the amount that they can be earning and the amount that they get coming through as earned income.
Yeah, and it has, as you say, that transparency element is built into it, isn't it? You have to be able to see what's come in, and what's due to you as well, which gives some people some clarity of sight over their financial earnings, right?
Absolutely, and the crucial thing is that transparency is there if you look at the trunk at the moment, but for a lot of people, they don't operate a formal trunk. This is going to give the same level of transparency for those who operate it in a different way, how much money is coming in through credit cards, cash if the team choose to pool it, and how much is coming back out, and it will have to be paid out frequently, so that you won't be able to delay the payment of that. People will get that immediately. Now there are checks and balances within that. There will be pros and cons, because a lot of businesses have been keeping a certain amount to be able to smooth out the payment of trunk payments throughout the year, so that people have certainty of income. We understand that they will be able to continue doing that if it's by agreement, but we're waiting to see that detailed set of regulations before being able to give definitive advice. For anybody who does need it, there's advice, guidance, support on our website. We are going to be running a webinar. We are making as much as we can freely available. There will be a legal helpline and advice line that is members only. So if you're a member of UKHospitality, you'll be able to get that. But the webinar will be freely available to all.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm conscious of time, and Cara is very good at keeping me to the time, because otherwise I get carried away and we'll be here for 2 hours. There's a couple of comments that have come through that I'll open this up to the floor. If anyone wants to comment on any of these, then please feel free. If only we could make the government understand that London depends on hospitality. We need free TfL travel for anyone in the industry. I currently lose £150 a month just on travel to and from work using my Oyster card. but without us, there would be no London tourism.
Yes, I mean, the Mayor of London does get it. He published his manifesto yesterday, as did the Conservative candidate, and other candidates putting forward manifestos that are coming through. They are looking at fares, and more importantly, they're looking at night tube. One of the things we have been pushing hard on for our sector in particular is the crossover period. You can get a 24-hour cap on fares, but it doesn't run as a rolling 24 hours. So for anybody working in the nighttime economy, they often don't benefit from that cheaper travel because they're travelling across 2 days. We have asked the Mayor to be able to deal with that, both for ULEZ, for the congestion charge, and for fares. I don't think we'll ever get to a stage, given the current state of public finances, that you'll be able to get free tube travel. But there is a recognition of how important our sector is to the economy of London, not just in its own right, but more importantly, the City of London doesn't function unless you've got people who are providing the lunches and the dinners for the business deals to go ahead. The government business doesn't function unless we're feeding the public services and the civil servants. And I don't function coming into my office in central London unless somebody's making a cup of coffee, and I can't make that quality level of cup of coffee to get me through the day. So, there is a recognition that we are the foundation as well as being economically important in our own right.
Yep. I agree. Mex, anything from your point? Because I think I was watching Sacha Lord talk at the IOH conference up in the north, and he was talking about actually safety of our workers as well, and being able to give them the safe travel options, especially late at night. And I mean, is that something that Women in Food Network have also looked at, and what are the reports like coming through?
I mean, it's absolutely, it's being aware of traveling on very either night buses or late night tubes is incredibly apparent for everyone, but particularly for women, and even if you're traveling in by yourself, or not using public transport, the safety of car parks at that time of night is also something that is very apparent. And you probably know that Natalie Campbell from Bellew Water is standing as mayor for this year, and one of her campaigns is very much about safer streets and safer travel for women in particular, particularly in areas of in areas of central London. So the city does need to be safe for us all, but for women in particular, at that time of night, travelling back from a late shift at a restaurant, you do want to feel safe, and the Mayor and London certainly need to be able to help to make that safety much more apparent. Obviously we've had the hideous things like Sarah Everard case, which was very much about safety, and that was only at 9 o'clock at night. Imagine that, tenfold on people feeling that they can't walk back from somewhere at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is obviously quite a common thing to happen within hospitality.
Can I just say though, I mean, there is a danger of us being too London centric. I think sort of many of our colleagues in Manchester, Glasgow, Newcastle, other parts would look on in envy at somebody asking from London about, can we make travel at night free? They have no night buses, they have no night tubes. That's why Sacha was talking about it, because in Manchester it doesn't exist. So we're needing to have better nighttime transport options across our major metropolitan cities. London has good, it's not brilliant, but it has good late night transport and late night running of the tubes in particular. And there is issues to do with cost, but in vast swathes of our city centres, there is no late night transport to get you to and from work safely, or to get your customers in and out. So, Liverpool is also the same. When you've got major music events, you don't have people being able to get back and get out other than by car, and that is limiting. So we need to improve transport across our major cities.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic. We don't often tend to think about it, do we? But actually, it's part of a much broader conversation around the safety of and making this fantastic sector, this profession, something that parents can be confident that their children will be safe coming in. They know that they're going to be well looked after in terms of work-life balance, in terms of fair pay, in terms of equality, but also in terms of safety of travel to and from work. And it's a very interesting turning point that we're in hospitality. I'm very excited about this. I think we're going through a massive change, and I think the opportunities to be able to really ramp this up and to make sure that our industry is not just third or fourth, but one of the leading industries in the world, I think is just there. It's not that far away, right?
No, it's not. And I think we have had a COVID reset moment where lots of ways of working that we've just done because we've always done it that way have changed. People have looked again at terms and conditions. We've got a shortage in the labour market, not just in our sector, but across the economy. We have to work harder to be able to make sure we are looking after our teams in the way that you describe. We are investing in training. You've got the Hoteliers Charter, you've got the Health and Wellbeing Charter. We can point as a sector to having put right some of the problems of the past and being able to commit to investing in our people, our communities, and in developing and growing forward. So I think you're right. It's a hugely exciting time, and it's great opportunities that are available to us if we can just seize that moment.
Yeah, and I should point out as well, obviously there's been the change in the apprenticeship levy, which now means that levy funding can be accessed by SMEs and those who previously might have had to pay a contribution for levies. So it means that actually now there's a lot more opportunity for people to start taking on apprenticeships, which has a tremendous impact on retention. I think Lee Wolseley from Stonegate a couple of years ago said there was a 33% increase in retention based on someone going through an apprenticeship. And not only will they stay in your business longer, but they'll be much more upskilled and much more knowledgeable about a whole wave of different educational pieces. And I thought I'd muted that.
Yeah.
What a way to finish.
You're right. And I think we should take that opportunity to be able to make sure that people do get that. They do stay in the business longer. They do commit. They get to higher level and they access management and leadership, and you've got a career ladder. Again, huge amount of information, advice, support, guidance on the UK Hospitality website, because we've done a lot of investment around this to show how you can go from level 2 right the way through to level 7. And that is about starting to bust the myths that this isn't a career, there isn't a path. There is, and we get people who are coming in, they are stickier. We've just done a pilot with DWP about people who are long-term unemployed having pre-apprenticeship training. We have an 85% success rate in getting those people off benefits into work, into a rewarding career, accessing a higher level apprenticeship. And these are real jobs. If you go to an apprentice in KPMG or the government or a bank, you're there for 1 year and then you have a job to apply for. Ours are a seamless pathway. You come in, you do your training, and you've got a career straight away. So we should be celebrating and doing more of it.
Yeah, agreed.
We'll be talking about that in more detail on the 3rd of May. If anyone wants to join us on that one, get your questions ready.
Thank you, Cara. Okay, perfect. Any final closing remarks from any of our guests or yourself, Cara, before we close this down and try and keep to as close to 30 minutes as possible?
I'm still reeling from the buzzer.
I'm going to have to edit that out, because if I forget to mute it again, obviously this goes out as a podcast episode as well. I might have to put a pre-warning out, guys. Just close your ears, or just edit it out, I guess, with technology.
Yeah. I think my closing comments would be, yes, it is incredibly tough at the moment, and it has been incredibly tough, but there are reasons to be optimistic. Inflation is on that downward path. Interest rates will follow. Yes, the costs in the business are still extreme, but they are also starting to come down. And as that starts to improve and feed through in the economy, customers will come out again. And we know that throughout the pandemic and throughout the last 18 months of the cost of living crisis, 5 out of 7 customers have said to us that their top priority when they've got any disposable income is coming back to eat and drink out. They miss socializing safely with family and friends, and they want to come back to the things that we do best. And that's what hospitality is all about. It is giving everybody that brilliant moment in their day, whether it's a cup of coffee, a celebratory meal, a drink with friends after work, just that moment when we can all come together as human beings and celebrate it. And that's what we should keep in mind and keep hold of as we go forward.
Thank you, Mex.
Yeah, I think Kate said it all. There definitely is a beginning to be more confidence amongst the consumers, which is obviously going to rub off onto the hospitality industry, because as you said, when things are good and there are things to celebrate, you will visit hospitality and you'll want to visit a nice, vibrant form of hospitality when you do that. So yeah, let's be there ready for the consumers as they actually realise that things are not quite as bad as they
Yeah, and thank you. And from our point of view, you know, we're moving and transitioning into playing a much more of an active role when it comes down to celebrating those businesses who culturally, who work-life balance, who supports and educational wise are doing the right things. Because there's some tremendous clients that we work with who are just absolutely nailing it. And, you know, 5-10 years ago, if you looked at that business, you're like, it's impossible. It will never work. You know, there's no way that 4 working days and support and full training, etc., would ever work. But it's happening. And so, you know, we're also going to take more of an active role in actually saying to people, look, this is possible. You can do it. Here are some case studies. Here's the information. You know, making sure that the resources from all of our counterparts around the globe are available to help with that as well. Because, again, that starts to change the rhetoric with regards to people saying that people should work in hospitality. It's a great industry, but I'm not sure I'd let my children work in it currently. We need to start to change that. It has to change from internally before the external will start to change. And I think there's some very, very exciting things. There's some incredible organizations that we just need to champion more, I think, within our sector, and we'll be working hard to do that over coming years. Thank you very much. Cara, I can see you're about to
over again.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to drop the off stream. Thank you to the guests. I hope that there's been some great comments, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.
Well, do you want me to say who's on next, or?
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind, actually.
So, yeah, thank you, Mex and Kate. It was great. So it's really great to hear from you both. Next week, we have got Lisa Hobbs, CEO of Etterman Projects in Australia, and Bianca Tavella, CEO and founder of Fair Shot Cafe in London. So we look forward to chatting to them.
Thank you. What's our subject for next week, Cara?
Well, we don't know that yet because it needs to be something that's current that week. So
okay, right. We'll keep
we will
it.
put that out on social. Don't you worry, Kris.
Eyes on the news. Eyes on the news. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Cheers for both of you for joining us. I appreciate you're both very busy. So thank you, and see you soon.